In the early 1970s, the reality of war entered the American living room every night. Families watched news footage of soldiers in dense jungles and the fallen returning in flag-draped coffins, fueling a period of deep national division and social unrest. Gilbert Villapando grew up in this shadow. After leaving high school, he viewed the military through the lens of those protests, yet he felt a pull toward the Navy. He needed the structure of the uniform to avoid the failure he feared was waiting for him in civilian life. This global map shows the invisible lines of nuclear threat and deterrence that defined the era. The United States and the Soviet Union aimed world-ending weapons at each other across the oceans, creating a suffocating atmosphere where a single mistake could trigger a catastrophe. While civilians back home practiced duck and cover drills and watched the news, sailors in the Mediterranean lived in a floating pressure cooker. On a ship like this, you are isolated from the world, serving as a visible sign of resolve in a standoff that never stayed still. It created a strange existence for the crew. They dedicated their youth to a brutal regimen of drills and readiness, rigorously preparing for a devastating global war that they desperately hoped would never happen. This view of the flight deck captures the dense, high-stakes environment of a 1976 deployment. For 62 straight days, the horizon stretched endlessly, and the ship became the crew's entire world, a tiny island of steel in a region nearing a breaking point. Ship life was defined by the smell of machinery and the crushing weight of 18-hour workdays. Physical fatigue became a permanent state, as the noise of the vessel and the repetition of drills blurred the days together into a single industrial grind. The theoretical danger of the Cold War suddenly turned hot during the 1976 Lebanon crisis. As Beirut descended into civil war, the Navy was ordered to respond, shifting the crew instantly from training exercises to a real-world crisis. The shift was felt most in the ordnance magazines. Sailors who had spent months practicing with training equipment were suddenly ordered to assemble live bombs. These weapons weren't just for a classroom. They were ready to be unleashed if the regional violence expanded. Physically building those bombs forced the crew to face the moral weight of their mission. They realized that while their readiness was meant to deter violence, the tools in their hands could cause a level of destruction that no amount of good intentions could ever repair. This schematic shows the narrow Strait of Messina, where the USS Saratoga collided with a container ship in 1977. At the point of intersection, a routine movement became an emergency, proving millions of tons of steel did not make the crew invincible. That sense of vulnerability was most acute during the night watch. When the mechanical noise of the day died down and the darkness closed in over the rail, a sailor was left entirely alone with the silence of the ocean. The silence turned the watch into a space for internal spiritual warfare. Standing near the brink of a nuclear standoff, the exhaustion of the deployment gave way to quiet prayers for a clean heart and the strength to serve without becoming hardened by the tools of war. Endurance kept a sailor at his post, but the real struggle took place in the mind, maintaining a steady hand on the watch while guarding a spiritual hope for a world where such vigilance is no longer required. That hope was reinforced by the Navy's role in evacuating civilians from Beirut. It revealed a side of military power focused on rescue and the protection of life, using a massive fleet not for conquest, but as a path to safety for terrified families. On this diagram, the outer ring represents the perimeter of military deterrence. While that line can keep an enemy at bay, it cannot reach the chaotic nodes inside to entangle a civil war or heal the generational hatred that causes a society to fracture. This realization bridged the gap between Gilbert's past and his present. His youthful questions about the purpose of war didn't disappear. They evolved into a deep respect for the discipline and sacrifice required to stand between danger and the vulnerable. He came to see military service and the weapons he handled as temporary measures, necessary for a season, but never the final answer to the world's brokenness. This is the legacy shared by the sailors of the Cold War. They carried the psychological burden of the nuclear brink in silence, standing watch through the long nights so the rest of the world didn't have to. The years of exhausting drills and weapon assembly served one singular aim: to maintain a peace so stable that those very weapons would never be needed. They stood watch in the shadow of war, looking toward a day when the spirit of conquest is finally removed and the nations no longer learn to fight.